Good evening, Zambia, the United Kingdom, and the rest of Europe. And I believe it's a good morning and good afternoon in Canada and America, respectively. Thank you so much for joining us on this stupendous Resurrection Sunday, a day when our Lord Jesus Christ rose from the dead to reconcile humanity to his Father and to give us a brand new life. Now, it's Sunday, the 17th of April, 2022, and the time is exactly 21:15, and I believe it's 22:15 in Lusaka. Now then, welcome to the Linda Banks Show on TV Bakwetu, and we are broadcasting live on YouTube and the Linda Banks Facebook page, the Elias Mucha page, TV Bakwetu page, as well as various other social media platforms. Now, kindly share this link to your friends and family, and as we get ready to start. Actually, before we get started, could you just kindly type in the comment section below where you're getting us from, and then we'll be able to say a quick hello before we get started. I'll be looking at the comments, and we can say a quick hello. On today's program, to help me discuss this topic candidly, I have Professor Jones Katsunso, PhD. I'm not going to attempt to actually itemize all the qualifications Professor Kasonso has. Professor Kasonso, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Linda, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. Mwelo, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Linda, and welcome to all the viewers.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chilufya, happy Resurrection Sunday. How are you doing?
Thank you, Mrs. Bax. Thank you, all the viewers.
Thank you. Now there's an epidemic of broken romance and marital relationships in our times today. Now we're going to explore what some of the causes are, how can we get around these challenges, and questions around, is it even feasible to expect our marriages to last as long as our parents' marriages did last? Now, I've been looking at some statistics which are quite shocking. Today I was reading one of the local papers, and there is an article that I would like to show you actually. So if you thought, so there's a paper right here, and I'll just read you a little bit about what it says. So the headline is "Divorce Filings Surge as No-Fault Laws Allow for Blame-Free Breakups." So this is where people are encouraged not to blame one another, and they're encouraged to actually just file for divorce without citing any blame. So the number of couples filing for divorce, it says, surged after no-fault divorce laws came into force. The government has confirmed that it has received about 3,000 divorce applications just over last week. 3,000 compared to an average of 2,000 applications a week last year. Now, still, that is quite high. So I was thinking, what is going on in society? And there has been talks about how divorce rates have increased in Zambia. So it was quite interesting to see that it actually isn't just Zambia. Now, Professor Kasonso,
Yes.
what do you think are the causes of this? Is forever or happily ever after dead? What is going on?
Thank you, Ms. Banks, for the generous question. The first thing I would like to comment on is the cultural shift that has taken place over the last several decades into the 21st century. We have gone through a cultural transformation significantly through the advent of technology, the incoming of entertainment, and also through global business. Movies, when we talk about entertainment, music, and all the cultural wave that has come, particularly the infusion of the Western and postmodern cultures into our innate and local cultures, that has altered our paradigm, the way we Zambians ordinarily would perceive a romantic relationship or a marriage in the context. So these changes that have come have shifted our perceptions, the way we look at relationships, and what is important in a relationship. The goalposts have changed, what would be a goalpost for our parents' generation has moved for our generation. The goalposts have moved. Ordinarily, what your father would be able to do to keep your home, you attempt those techniques, and in your case, they might not work because the culture has changed. There's been the infusion into our values, the post-Christian culture or postmodern culture that has altered the way we see life. So that is where I see the strategic shift. Because if you see particularly the one of the key characteristics of the postmodern culture is relational impermanence. You get to move with the economic dynamics of the economy in your location, and even relationships are heavily impacted by the dynamics of the economy around your family, whether you are living in Zambia or abroad. So that's in the preliminary. That's where I would place the cause. It's a general shift of mood and the cultural paradigm through which we see the prism of relationships. So we become a casualty of that paradigm shift.
Thank you very much. Mwelwa, now this obviously is a bit of a cliche question, and obviously the same question that I've asked Professor Kasonso. Why are so many people giving up on the legalities of a romantic union, even after seemingly finding the one?
I think, like Professor said, that the goalposts have changed, and I think human beings are so complex. That's the other thing. We're so complex, and what determines right and wrong begins to vary when reality sets in, I suppose. There's that element as well. So when you are in the marriage, as per se, and maybe you don't like what's happening and things are not favorable, then you can go out. And this clause that has existed, because I think in our parents' generation, the clause was frowned upon. There's a stigma attached to being divorced. I remember growing up, and you'd hear these hash tones like whenever I got divorced, it was not something that people were easily swallowing. But because of probably, like Professor did say, that there's the globalization element and cultures have shifted, and we have so infused. The world looks like it's one place today when actually it's not one place. And so some of the nuances or the acceptables from one culture have shifted into our culture. And now it's acceptable to leave a marriage. Even the conditionalities that existed prior and the stigma have completely shifted. It's easy for me to move in and out, kind of thing. Especially if you do not have your own maybe restraints or beliefs or principles, it's very easy that I'm going to say, right, I think I need to move out from this.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that contribution. Mr. Chilufya, the same question to you. Do you think, as postmodern, as Professor Kasonso likes to refer to us, we have strayed away from the traditions and cultural outlook on marriage that our forefathers and fathers had?
Yeah. There are two things here, Linda. Tradition, yes. Obviously we've become modernized. We've mixed up Nabasungu, and Abadensu. It's easy to come out of marriage because most of them, they don't even respect marriage in partnership. But our forefathers and our fathers, they respected marriage. No, and to divorce, it was very difficult because that was tradition. But then our tradition, if you look at our tradition of strictly, the African tradition of Ubuntu is similar to the Bible. And what does the Bible say about marriage? Marriage is an institution of God. So God created marriage not for sex. God created marriage for multiplication. So
So how
God,
can you multiply without sex then?
no, not for pleasure, not for
Okay.
pleasure, not for pleasure.
Okay. I'm
Yeah,
glad you qualified that.
God, according to God, sex was supposed to be done in and in the boundary of marriage, and the purpose was to fulfill his purpose. Kabiye ni musandane ngemisesega ya mchalo through marriage.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now,
And then Malinda, and also that for God, it meant that the foundation of that marriage should be based on the word of God, on the rock. Whatever is built on the rock, if a house is built on the rock, it's very strong. It's got a strong foundation. And this is what is lacking. I'll go deeper. I've got what is known as five important things that should make a strong marriage. So
okay.
what the main issue now, most of the marriage are not built on a strong foundation.
Okay.
One, which is the word of God. Two, which is tradition. And as a result, marriages are not lasting.
Okay. I'll play devil's advocate on that. You've mentioned a marriage is not built on the rock, and the rock being God's, isn't it? We have so many divorce cases in the church. Just a recent one, Hillsong's has been plagued with so many divorces, both men and women cheating on their spouses and filing for divorce. But those are churches and institutions where you'd think that their marriage was based on the rock, as well as
Have we lost Mrs. Banks?
Mrs. Banks, where are you? Mr. Chilufya, you're on mute.
Makasonso, can you chip in? What
Yeah,
Malinda was
yeah. So there, I like Mrs. Banks's question on that. Mr. Chilufya, there's something that you said which I do like. We come at marriage usually, or romantic relationship, based on our own ideas and attraction to the people we like. Yeah, but we do forget a powerful fundamental, and the powerful fundamental of those type of relationship is that they have a designer. God designed them. So if you get something and you ignore the terms or the prescriptions of the person who designed it, then you are going to crash with it. So I think that we are crashing and burning, Mr. Chilufya, to Mr. Chilufya's point, because of not incorporating the predescriptions of the author of such a relationship. Marriage is a God idea. If we take it on God's terms, it can be a good thing and it can lead to a fulfilling way of life. But if we take it on terms that are away from that, then we have a situation where it crashes and bends. I am not one who looks at people's marriages in church as the ideal marriages. I am not the one who looks at, because even people in the church, even if they come to the church, they are broken people. They are broken people, just like anybody else. So because they are broken people, the same issues that plague people who don't come to church still plagues those marriages. And sometimes the church world has created this culture that if they put their marriage on stage and therefore it looks good, for many years it looks good, people just assume that that marriage is being carried according to the scriptures. It might not be the case. So even if you bring your marriage to the church, or you even parade it in the church, if you still the pre-descriptions of the maker of that type of relationships are not followed, it's going to crash and burn. That's what I believe. That's what I think is going to happen. So there are no guarantees that just because the marriage is in the church or the marriage has even been used to on the church platform, it is everybody in that union has followed the prescriptions of the maker. So if we follow the prescriptions of the maker and we follow the traditions, I think we have a better chance. But the moment we stray from any of those, because like Ms. Banks mentioned an important point here. The people in the church cheat and then they get divorced. Where did God say if one cheats, then you should get divorced? Yeah, so that is part of the postmodern culture. That's part of the culture from the movies, the culture from those other things. Yes, even in the scriptures, there is a provision of there is a provision in the scriptures for divorce where there is infidelity per se, but there is no obligation in the scriptures. But the postmodern culture places that obligation there. And if you look back in the text of the old marriages, and most of the old marriages were also polygamous marriages. It wasn't so from the beginning, but for the longest time since humanity lived on this planet, there were more than one spouses or more than in those families, and those people were able to serve God and honor God just okay. But turn it around to the postmodern, it's what we call one and only. And I don't see that concept in most ancient marriages, either in the scriptures or in the traditions of our fathers. So we have created these artificial rules that have just put us in a position where that type of institution is just becoming unworkable and confused. Here where I live, more than 50% of first-time marriages, all of them, they end in divorce. And I believe it is the expectations and the traps that we set for ourselves to take marriage on the terms that it wasn't intended in the beginning, from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Professor Kasson. So whilst you are on that topic, so do you think it's even feasible to expect our marriages to be long-lasting? If that's the case, is it too much expectation? We should just kind of have this blasé kind of attitude towards marriage. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Thank you for that question. I will go to Mr. Chilufia's proposal. In the scriptures, if we read a Psalm 127, it says this, and I quote, "Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain that build it."
Okay.
Unless the watchman, unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen guard in vain. And the children of youth are a heritage from the Lord. So now, what's the point of that scripture? The principle of that passage is that what God builds, He guards. So, so the security is in the builder. So if the relationship, I believe, is being built on the principles of God, it is inherently guarded and protected. So there can be hope if we do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Muego.
I think when we look at some topics, I think depending on what governs our society, it becomes our compass. But on the other hand, I'll be a bit of the devil's advocate. So it said that amongst mammals, only just about 9% of species are monogamous. And among primates, so just 29% are. Humans are diverse a lot, but before Western imperialism, so for us, we'll be saying modernization 83% of indigenous societies were polygamous, 16% were monogamous, and 1% polyandrous. So this is where women have multiple husbands.
Yeah. We're going
And
to touch on that actually, because
yes,
it's quite prolific here now.
Yes, so that is minus Christianity.
Yeah.
If the compass that you're using within your society is Christianity, then obviously you fall within that spectrum and you have to live according to those guidelines. So when we're saying, are you building on the rock? It's very subjective. Is the other person equally on the same rock? And if they're not on the same rock, or if they're on the same rock, but on a more, could you say, acceptable rock, like in the Pentecostal circles, where it is okay, you can divorce. Because again, when you look at the Bible is very specific. If you divorce, you cannot remarry unless your spouse dies.
Yeah.
You're still tied to that bond. But, well, it's the same person that's going to divorce me and marry me.
Yeah.
So then
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask Professor Kasonso, because here you are wearing so many hats. You're a professor as well as a clergyman. Now, I've had a couple of questions asked by some followers on Facebook. What about, we are basing, a bit like what Mwelo had said, we're basing this discussion on the Christian ethos, Christian ideology. What about pagans? What about atheists? What about Muslims, Sikhs? And
yeah, I'll tell you something about Muslims.
Yeah.
I worked among them. And the group of Muslims I worked among, if you take your sexual activities outside the bounds of a marriage and you are caught or arrested in that, the law requires you to be sent back to your Mecca. But they do allow for families, for a man to have up to 4 wives. For example, in the United Arab Emirates, an Emirati would have this giant house built out of a grant or a loan from the government. And it's like a palace, and he has his family seat in there. So those are the principles that they have based on their culture. And I was curious enough to ask them difficult questions. And according to their understanding or their worldview, that safeguards their families, makes their children grow up in families, and they have the lowest percentage of divorce cases in the world. They also have the lowest percentage of sexually transmitted diseases in their methodology, mode of doing things. So, yeah. So,
surprise. Why aren't we surprised about that? Because obviously they've got multiple sexual partners and they're just passing it around.
They have the lowest in their section. Yeah, they have the lowest sexually transmitted diseases rates. They also have the lowest divorce rates.
And these are Muslims you're talking about in the
United States? Yes,
okay,
in their culture. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So for for people who don't relate their relationships to any form of higher power, I have a little bit of a difficult time on which basis they are going to have. Obviously, in most cases, one of them will be a religious person or some form of religious, affiliate. Yeah, but I have zero counsel for them because I believe that the source of such relationships is God. And God gave us that platform and that enterprise. And if we strive to do it on his terms, we can be successful. There is a chance. But also, there is a chance it might fall apart because of the nature of the world we live in. It's a broken world. Nothing works right in this world, but we can still try and keep trying.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, it brings me to a question of love itself. So would you consider love as being universal, or is there a universal standard of measuring love? And if so, why is it necessary to add a legal binding contract? Do you think that's probably where we're going wrong? Bachelufia, can you be in a love relationship without it being legally binding? Like a marriage, for instance.
Malinda, first I wanted to go back.
Your volume is a bit low, Mr. Chilufia.
Yeah, Sasha, I wanted to go back to the issue: is marriage sustainable? The question you asked, Bakason, so very important question. I just want to add
Okay,
one or
sure,
two
go for it.
things, because you were saying we are one of the viewers was saying we are basing our explanation on the biblical standards. What about the somebody who is not a Christian, who is a pagan? Yeah, but for Bakas also mentioned something. Even a person who doesn't go to church, there is something they believe in their tradition. Most of them, they believe in their tradition. And when we look at our traditions, even in religions, everything, they are similar. Yeah, they are similar, and everybody believes in God. They don't believe in our God, but they believe in Muhammad or whatever spiritual leader. But then they they are some of the things that are very important, and I'll mention them quickly. And this has nothing to do with the Bible, and that's what makes a lot of marriages stronger. So I'll start one. The healthiest relationship are built on a strong foundation of mutual respect. This works in marriage, in a relationship between you and myself, in at work. So if there is mutual respect in every marriage, that's the main foundation from the beginning. That marriage is gonna last. That foundation is a very strong foundation. Two, we need to choose our spouses wisely. That has nothing to do with the Bible. So a pastor in the church would choose a spouse wrongly. And then when he divorces, you say the pastor is divorced. So when you but Natasha, if people can take time to assess, evaluate their partners, marriages would last. But we rush into it. At love is blind. And then when
Okay.
problems start happening, you're already in it. Now you want to come out. So we need to learn that. And then two, and then three, we need to ensure in that marriage all the needs are met. Because in a marriage, each person has got needs.
We are going to dive
But
deep
but
into
but
that.
but then you need to make sure that the other partner has got also needs. So
Yes.
why are you trying to make sure that your needs are met? You need to strive that your partner's needs are also met. Then you need to maintain closeness. And then five, uh, and five, you have to make sure that there's constructive arguments in
Okay.
your marriage.
You are going into the next question. You're preempting the next bit. I first of all
And,
wanted us
and then and
to.
then and then your question about what was your question now about love?
Yes. We will preempty solutions to those problems. First of all, I wanted us to tackle the reasons why we're in this pickle. What are the reasons why we're in this predicament as postmodern Zambia or United Kingdom
Yeah,
or
the reason is we want to do things so fast. Patience. Everything now in the world is, what do they call it? Instant. Instead of marriage, even in the Bible, quali courtship. Instead of courtship, that you take away. So you don't. So much that take away now, the moment you start having sex before marriage, then that foundation is already ruined and you've gone into it. And
So
then when there are
Abatale,
problems,
Patrick,
But what about the ones
Abatale,
that get married after 3 weeks and are still married today?
exactly,
I know
exactly.
it's not
couples that knew
it's
each
not
other for like
Yeah,
a couple
yeah,
of
but
days
but
and
but
Okay, just a
yeah,
mostly
minute.
mostly
Can I just
that
pause the
one is okay.
conversation? Professor Kasons, can I just pause the conversation? If you see your face on the screen, it means it's your spotlight. If I take you out, it means it's time to stop talking, and I'll give you another opportunity just so that we can make this a little bit more manageable. Okay, sorry. And then I'll come back to Professor Kasonso and Mr. Chilufya. Mwelo.
so I was saying that the absoluteness of saying what is love. Again, love is so subjective. It depends on what you have grown up assuming love is. And if your examples of love are so bad, you will equally reflect the horrible examples. So I'll give you an example. One of the examples I'll use is the story of Peter Pan. I love stories. So the story of Peter Pan, he's there and he thinks that he decides he's not going to grow up. And the reason he won't grow up is because his mentor, whoever inspires him, is Captain Cook, who's scared of a crocodile who has a ticking time bomb, in his stomach. Mm-hmm. And he mirrors his entire being on that. And he thinks, I don't want to be that type of person, so I'm going to be young forever, which is what a lot of us mirror even in our own lives, because we look at whoever is our example and we either choose to be them or not to be them. I need to explain why maybe some people, we find maybe if you're coming from a broken home, you're going to do the same things, and people start laughing and saying, the curse or the sins of the father and all sorts of things, when actually you're just hearing what you have seen.
Yeah.
So love is so subjective.
Absolutely. And some people call this generational either blessing or generational curse and that sort of stuff. Thank you so much. Professor Kasonso, you had something to add. And let me just make a disclaimer. This conversation is a very passionate one, and I enjoy passion.
So there are really no wrong or right answers here. We're just exploring and just sharing some of these thoughts. And I want if we follow the Christian ethos or we follow our traditions, when does marriage begin? And also, if we follow the Christian ethos or we follow the Christian, when does marriage begin? So when you begin to discuss sex before marriage, sex after marriage, sex during marriage, you have to take that as a topic on its own. So I think that we have to confine ourselves to the relational dynamics of what is breaking our relationships, what is making current romance and marriage based on romance a challenge.
But couldn't premarital sex be one of the challenges, though?
Premarital sex, I am a little bit conflicted on that topic for two reasons. When you read the scriptures, when you have sex with someone, you become one with that person. According to the scriptures. That's why they say in the scriptures, don't have those type of relationships with a prostitute, because you become one with a prostitute. So at what point does a woman and a man become one? It is when they have sexual relations. So yes, if they stagger it for the official day, but if they don't stagger it before the official day, that means they are already one before the official day. They are already one before the official day. So in that type of teaching, when you are taking them to the altar to marry them, because they are already one, then they are already married.
So you as a preacher, Professor Kasonso, you're a preacher, young Mary and John come to you, they're like, Pastor, we want to get married, but we've already had sex. What would you say to them?
I would say nothing to them.
Why?
The reason why I would say nothing to them is it is not my role to participate in their sexual life. But it is my role to marry them if they have fulfilled the terms of the church where I am a priest.
Okay, but wouldn't it be your role to counsel them? Or let's say they haven't had sex, they want to have sex before marriage. We're sticking to
the point I was trying to make, Ms. Banks, is this. If we are assuming these guys are already one because they have already had sexual relations, and if we are assuming that their marriage is starting at the altar, then the whole project there in itself is a lie, because they're already married, they're already one. So the concept of sex before marriage is a very confusing one, because in the scriptures, the oneness is not at the altar when we pronounce them married. There is no such obligation in the scriptures. The oneness comes when they are having sexual relations. So we bring these colorful weddings in the church, which are technically a mockery if we are assuming that that's when their marriage began. Their marriage began when they started having sexual relations.
The Bible clearly does talk about not fornicating. So how does that reconcile with your confusions, shall we call it, in regards to this?
Yeah, so fornication, you cannot relate fornication to the wedding day. The definition of fornication is not on the wedding day. It's not even related to the day you acquire a marriage certificate. Fornication is a loose sexual life where you sleep here, you sleep there, you sleep somewhere else, and then you go and sleep with someone, and then you sleep someone else. That's what fornication is, to simplify it in its definition. The definition of fornication has got nothing to do. The difficult one is this one. It's the AD, the adultery. The adultery is clearly once you are in the sexual relationship of a marriage, then you diversify away from that illegally.
Okay.
That's a different one. But for fornication, okay.
No, finish your thought. It's fine.
Fornication is sleeping in multiple places with different people. That's what fornication is.
Thank you very much. I could see Mr. Chilifya making all sorts of interesting faces. Pray tell, what was that about? Did you agree or disagree with anything that Professor Kasonso said?
No, at all. Bakasonso was just reading my mind. You know, Bakasonso, we friends, but again, spiritually, we think about the same things.
Okay.
So he was just saying what was in my mind. Yeah,
right.
what Bakasonso was saying was correct.
Okay.
Marriage is not on the altar. Marriage is when you have sex. So if you had sex before marriage, you're already married, even before you you get into the altar.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have a viewer who agrees with you. One man, one machine. I don't know what they mean by one machine. It's this is why they think that it's for this reason that indeed it should be one partner. In addition, you can't love two people the same way. So it's a ridiculous notion to say that you can love two people the same way. So this is quite interesting. Now, I'm going to pause a little bit because I can see quite a lot of comments and people requesting for a link because either they want to join the conversation or they want to ask a question. So Joshua, I've sent a link. So if you want to join the conversation, please just click on that. So many comments and questions. I don't even know where to begin from. If I don't mention your name, please do not frown upon that too much. So Mr. Mpundu says, as regards to marriage, the weights are not titled to the one side or the other. What happens into the Christian marriage happens also in relationships that does not believe in God. Okay, that is fair enough. Marriage in Zambia is on two parts: customary under the Marriage Act, and the other part is what? Professor Kasonso, what's the other part?
The customary marriage and the one that you go to the council or the church.
Okay, yeah. So then Roy Drico Mundongo says, Professor, they also have sophisticated underground network of brothels exploring many Africans to okay, I won't read the rest of that. That is quite interesting, but I think you get the picture. I think he's referring to the Arabs you were talking about. That there's less.
Yeah, they diversify. They are. You see, they are not perfect human beings. They diversify, but it's not normal practice. It's not everybody who does that. It is some among them who would diversify and do all those kind of things. So, but on average, they maintain their gigs, and that's why they have the least infections of AIDS and other STDs, and they have the least number of court cases in the divorce courts.
Thank you very much. What I want to try and do is every topic that we tackle, we kind of involve the audience because they have, you'd be surprised, they have a whole lot of things to say about this. How many relationships, Professor, are legitimately built on God's principles? Question mark. Let us be realistic and address the marital issues at hand.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is to you.
That is a good principle. And when I mention God's principles, I am not suggesting that I have the statistics on that, but it's a principle that I follow, that if you take a product and use it according to the prescription of the one who made it, your chances of success with it will be better or higher. You know, so that is where we are saying that if we do these type of relationships based on the prescriptions of God, I think our safety, Nate, our safety level, we have a higher chance of safe landing. If we do not, there are more chances of crashes. And what we are having are crashes, either a departure from those principles, or if just a failure or on our part to live through into those principles. But if we have this mixed mash of cultures in the same marriage, you're following 6, 7 different cultures, you don't have a chance of succeeding at all. You have to have specific rules that bind your union together. Maybe you can have a better chance.
Yeah. Interesting points that you've just raised. There have been a lot of marriages that have got different cultures. You find the wife is from Islamic culture and the husband is from the Christian background, or not religious at all, but they still succeed. So perhaps that could mean that they abide or they adhere to the principles that Mr. Chilifia was talking about: mutual respect, understanding, and all that sort of stuff. So Danny says the song that was playing Piket Shala, Urieko, does not support monogamy at all. Bible versus our local tradition and culture. When you say Urieko, what do you mean, Danny? Can you respond to that? Urieko as in what? Like to sample, to taste? What are we talking about? Food or people? Please explain. Okay. We have been joined by Mr. Pombo. Are you there? Hi, welcome to the program.
Yeah.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Your contribution, please.
It's a beautiful topic, very, very encouraging and interesting. I'm also touched to see the high levels of separations and divorce, as you mentioned, in the UK and probably also in the United States. It's not different also here in Italy. There's quite a high level of separations and divorce. I wanted just to contribute about, I posed this question to tackle marriages, not only marriages as we understand them through Christian values, but any valid marriage. I wanted to contribute this because there are also, I think there's some indications which really constitutes a valid marriage. Whether you are a Catholic, you are a Muslim, whether you are a Jew, there are those, I think, indications. And I wanted to underline this. Going back to a canon law, one of the canon laws, well, that is 1055, it would explain the meaning of a marriage, the contract between the two parties. You call them lovers, you call them, I don't know, wife and husband, but the two parties come together and make a contract. And it is essential in making this contract, the consent, what is called the consent, the mutual consent, and the person is not supposed to be forced to enter into marriage. Our forefathers, even my parents, the time when my parents, they get married, they entered into marriage because their grand or uncles and the other people, they might have decided, go and marry this girl, she's very beautiful, well behaved. But nowadays, I mean, it's the mutual consent. It's quite fundamental, and also, of course, the procreation, the children, and the education of the children. Sometimes maybe in our culture, Zambia, we have children like some members of parliament in the last regime. I think we have some cases of that. When you have a lot of children and you don't take responsibility to educate them, that is quite very bad in one of the aspects that breaks the marriage, indeed.
Thank you very
And
much.
also, I think the essential properties in a marriage, I would say it's the unity and the indissolubility. Unity and the indissolubility of the two parties. When that is missing, that's where I think abantu bawupanafelelo line bamba nokulanda tilimbi mailo, I might just go away. Because we have to put that in the mind. Our culture also is full of that. Unity and indissolubility.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pombo. Brilliant. I've got another question on my Twitter account. Someone says it's a tricky one considering, actually it's a comment, considering the many entanglements we've seen, some religious beliefs demand so, whilst obviously they're talking about monogamy here. So they believe it's a tricky thing to be monogamous, considering the many entanglements that we have seen. Some religious beliefs demand so, whilst others do permit multiple. However, it's a question of morality and appreciating pros and cons on either side. Now, let's talk a little bit, touch a little bit on entanglements. We have, in the past year, we saw this word become quite famous, and it's become quite popular in the English dictionary, entanglement, made popular by one Jada Smith Pinkett, who shocked the world by admitting that she and her husband had agreed to be in entanglements, and she was caught in an entanglement or something like that. Mwelo. Could entanglements and then I also want you to touch on what Mr. Pombo said. He talked about mutual agreement on certain things. So the Smiths, for instance, they've agreed that they can have multiple, they can have relationships outside their union. Could that be problematic? Or, I mean, what's wrong with that?
I think it's interesting when we're discussing this topic, because maybe we look at it from a point of view like, the human history. Ideally, when you look at the history, and even when you look at the Bible, human being was sort of in isolation, and then they would get together with somebody and have a child. And the only reason they would stay with that person was because now they had children, and a child needs both parents. So essentially some sort of foundation needs to happen so the two come together. And then from there on, that has evolved. Because later on now we look at maybe, let's say, I'll use the Bible for this. I look at the story of Abraham. So Abraham is promised a son, and he's waiting for a son, and for whatever reason he thinks, it's not happening. So he goes and gets a handmaid. So in that culture, a handmaid came in for the purposes of continuing a family line and that kind of thing. And we can see it even in the stories that go on Joseph and stuff like that. The moment a wife couldn't maybe sustain or couldn't provide children, a handmaid came in. So there's been an evolution to coming to the monogamy element, because the world wasn't actually, it starts off monogamous, it gets into polygamous, then it comes back to so it's a changing of times. And even now, when we look into our cultures, there's a contradiction. I will go to my traditional teacher, and what my traditional teacher is going to teach me is actually in contradiction to what I'm living in now. So it made sense for them in times gone by. It made sense for you to tell my grandmother and say, look, if it come it made perfect sense. It doesn't make sense. Yes, it doesn't make sense now. I cannot be sat there and somebody stood on my foot and I'm just like, oh yeah, picture. Times have really changed. So when you look at it in those terms, people are evolving all the times. And like I said, people are complex. And depending on how you meet, Mr. Oscar says you're supposed to have mutual agreements and stuff like that. There's sometimes where just idiots meet, and if they've met, well, their ideas are going to be idiotic. You know what I mean? And even when you look at the entanglement idea for Jada and Will Smith, When I listened to their program, actually, this is where I think people haven't really paid attention. They had split up when she got into that entanglement or into that arrangement. Now they get back, and I suppose they didn't have a good word to use when they were trying to explain themselves, because people were questioning how this was a public thing when it ideally shouldn't be public. And their excuse was that, I think Will Smith did specify that she wasn't happy. So when she asks for a separation, he was okay with it. So when they get on that separation, then she meets with that August guy, and then she now calls him entanglement. Now, it doesn't justify what they did. Obviously, it's, in my head, I think that's utter rubbish.
Yeah.
It's actually quite dangerous, because what happens is men are competitive.
Yeah.
That's what polyandry is a bit, it's a fine line.
Yeah.
Men are competitive in that it becomes a dangerous environment for you as a woman, because then those people are competing over you. It's a bit of a fine line. And so even when into these arrangements, there are a lot of drawbacks. They might look like they're advantageous on certain elements, but there are so many drawbacks.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Professor Kasonso, you wanted to say something?
I agree with my sister, Ms. Tanisha. In Pursuit of Love, in the Kamajan Garden of Love, they wrote that wars have been shed, blood has been shed, wars have been waged, and kingdoms have been destroyed in pursuit of love. So that competitive thing is. So anyway, in my view, I've come to a realization that monogamy is the ideal. Actually, monogamy is the ideal. Monogamy is the ideal. And monogamy in its original context, it was a perfect marriage in a perfect atmosphere where there was no any other thing. And monogamy existed in the Garden of Eden. So monogamy is the ideal. Now, after the Garden of Eden enters the broken world, we, for thousands of years, didn't see much of monogamy. And we saw different variations to the institution of marriage. One of our brothers was actually blessed with 700 wives and 1,000 extra, 300 extra ones.
Blessed. I like the emphasis on blessed.
I don't even know how he survived them, but he had the grace and the power to navigate them. What? Yeah, he had the power and the grace to navigate them women in those numbers. You can go back, like the grandson of Abraham. He has got to marry his cousins, and they have to give him an extra girl. They say, okay, you should have married the first one first. Now you're going to marry the last one. So he marries another one. They give him an extra girl, and he has this large family of 12 kids from 4 different women. And then there's sibling rivalry and stuff like that. And that's the foundation of the kingdom of Israel, So my thoughts on that is that monogamy is the ideal, and its place is here in part. But historically, where monogamy was practiced, the man didn't have ex-girlfriends, ex-wives, ex-anything. No, he only had one woman for the rest of his life. Now, if we are claiming to practice monogamy in our day, did you have the ex-girlfriends? Did you also have ex-wives? So you can portray to the rest of the world what I call the marriage hypocrisy, that you're in monogamous relationship, but actually you're in a polygamous, or whatever, the Hiandro, whatever the other one that they're mentioning for the ladies. Yeah, so polyandro or whatever. So, so it's the monogamy is the ideal, and the rest of the types of relationships is the reality of our world today.
Okay, well, that's being very real, considering you are a preacher, man of the cloth. Now, can I just request that if you want to join the live broadcast, kindly put your video on, if that's all right. That would be lovely. So monogamy is the ideal, but reality dictates otherwise. There's side chicks, there are entanglements, there are all sorts of things. Now, because obviously this is more acceptable, especially in our culture, as in African culture, more acceptable for men to engage in these activities. I read an article just yesterday about how this woman, an African woman, engaged in multiple relationships. And obviously, when the husband found out, he was not very happy, but he had had several himself. So how do we reconcile that? Does this just have to happen for men? Is it just men who are allowed to have multiple partners if monogamy is not a realistic concept? Mwelo, what are your views on this?
I think it's actually being two-faced. And you can see it in a lot of cultures. Like I know, like the Bemba culture has that whole. I think I'm trying to remember the correct way they say it. I think they say uchende wa mwanakashi.
Oh yes.
Yes. Yes. So the idea that a man's infidelity will not destroy the home, whereas the woman's infidelity will destroy the home, it's a very two-faced ideology which forces women to stay in marriages. And this has happened for centuries. I'll give you an example. The fairy tale Beauty and the Beast. Mm-hmm. Apparently, it's set in a time where men were coming back from, I think it must have been World War I, or I don't know what war they'd come from, but they were, the men were battered, they were disfigured, they might not have been looking really good, and they were not getting married. So write a story like Beauty and the Beast so that women are able to accept these men, and it's it goes through history where women are given this hand that isn't necessarily offered to the men. And I think this is the same idea when you're saying, a man can cheat, but a woman shouldn't. Or
so do you think a woman should have same rights?
I think human beings should just treat each other equal, because the only difference we have is just our hormonal changes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Claire Moore Joshua, welcome to the program. What's your contribution, please?
Thank you so much.
We can't hear you. I think there's something wrong with your headsets.
Maybe your volume.
Okay, we will bring him back. Are you there? We'll bring him back when he sorts out his audio. Before you come on, please make sure your audio is working and your video is on. Okay, Mr. Shilufia, any contribution based on what we've just said?
Bamwelo mentioned about nani that actually kept reduced divorces.
But how fair is that though?
No, let me finish. I haven't finished. But Sasha, why are you
I will let you finish.
I haven't finished. But it's not allowed. It's not biblical, both for a man to misbehave or a woman to misbehave. But what is happening now in Lusaka as I'm talking? Because now both have to be treated equally. So if the husband is misbehaving, the wife is also misbehaving. I'll tell you this. I went to Zambia in 2010 when I went to bury my father. May his soul rest in peace. And it happened that a friend of mine had problems muchupo, and I was asked to go and negotiate, talk muliash. Can you believe it? And I discovered that won't say when the husband complained that when the wife complained that abakashwaleta misbehave, complained that abakashwaleta misbehave, the wife also says he's also misbehaving. Actually, but my husband has got a child. So whether it's a man doing it or a woman doing it, it's wrong. It shouldn't be done.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. And before Professor Kasonso submits his contribution, just a disclaimer. If I interject with a question, it's not interrupting you. It's because I want you to explain further on that topic. So don't get rather emotional about that. Professor Kasonso, go for it.
Yes. Yeah. So Yeah, we need to equalize the table. If one partner has diversified into other partners, and the other one, one's going out of the bounds of their relationship, should not be more consequential than the other person's. But we can't deny that culturally, that is the way it is. And it's these attempts to try and deny our culture, but at the same time leaving a ripples of our culture, that sometimes can bring problems that spiral from one relationship to the other relationship. What I've also noticed is this here in the West, particularly, so women, they use the word cheating. I don't even believe in that word. I don't even believe in the concept of what that word means and the implications, and even how it is used and how it is applied. So they catch a guy in what they call cheating. So now they run out of their house and they probably even take the children. And then guess what happens? They are now going to be dating other men who also are coming from homes where they have wives at the same time. So it's a broken world, and it's a very dirty pot. Every time we try to begin to compare and rationalize human sinfulness, we are always going to get stuck. I think that if you found somebody to live with and you have a good friendship, you should protect that friendship at all costs. If you do something wrong, go back and mend the relationship, and don't be in a hurry to run that they cheated or they did this, or all those kind of things. In the scriptures, particularly for Christians, it is not mandatory that once your partner has diversified, you should come and break the entire house. No. The option is there. The partner can be sent away. That option is there. Yeah. But that option should be weighed, and the cost of that decision should be weighed very, very, very well and very accurately.
Okay, interesting points there that you've just raised. If you find that person that you absolutely love, you click, treasure that and protect that instead of seek it. There's that phrase that says the grass is not always green on the other side, because you have to mow the lawn there as well. So you might perhaps think that you're going out to look for something better that doesn't exist in your house. You have to maintain that relationship in there. Before we move on to the next topic, Mr. Pombo, do you have anything to add based on what Mr. Chilufya said, or Professor Kasonso or Mwelwa?
I would just add on some of the reasons why we are experiencing a lot of maybe separations and divorces in recent marriages. Young men and women, they do not cherish the period prior to marriage. You know, the so-called courtship or friendship or girlfriend, I don't know, fiancé. That period is fundamental. I think in the new world, in the modern world, some of the relationship or the friendship is coming through a social network. The girls and boys, they know each other on social media, and they think that is a reality. You know, it's a different to speak to someone, to listen to someone. It's different from what you see on social media or on internet. On internet, Linda, Dr. So on the internet, we go and paint our lips, and I cut my everything and my hair, I comb my hair. But in the natural situation, you discover that makasa yandiwa Linda Banks yala nunko mamonene. That is the reality now.
Back to factory settings yala nunkain.
Exactly, mamone. And those things on social network, Valinda, you never discover those things. After 2 hours, alanda ashani walanda fit follow mamone. But you know, when these girls and boys, they are loving each other on social network, they think that it's so something beautiful, spicy, and all those things. Marriage it has a lot of aspects. So the time prior to a marriage, that time is supposed to be cherished and taken really, really serious. That is the time when you can find out that your partner had relations. When you're serious with that time, that your
Okay.
partner had a former boyfriend or a former girlfriend. That period, then you go into maturity and you get married, knowing that my partner had another girlfriend before I came in. But if that thing though they discover after they've got into marriage, that's why now these guys they just say, well, come on, I've bought my car. You have your own car. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Actually, Danny supports what you said there. We want to be white European or American. What we don't know is that we still have our own culture and tradition, and the developed, perhaps meaning the developed world, does not have what we still have in Zambia. Now, that is quite subjective, considering the divorce rates are just as high in Zambia as well as in Britain and the United States. So that is obviously that's his view. Now let's try our new guest and see if his audio is working. What is your contribution, and welcome to the program, Joshua?
Thank you so much. I don't know if you're able to get me now.
We are, yes. Well done.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so just to concur with everyone, I think the issue we are having now as a nation or as the world, it has to do with this distorted view of marriage. In the first place, people try to get marriage and define marriage from what they feel and what they think is right. It's more like a personal conviction. What is right is defined by what someone feels and what someone thinks is a conviction. But then, if we go from, if we were to start from Genesis before the fall, you realize that actually marriage, it was created between man and a woman. But there again, you have a problem where how do you define a man? Someone wants to define a man, someone would want to define a woman. So that's where now even the distorted view of marriage comes into play. And we see that even God, how God was creating, if you follow the pattern, He creates the heavens, then He creates the earth. He creates light, He creates darkness. So it's more like God is creating in pairs. He does not just create alone. So when we come after Genesis, after the fall, you see that actually we have got a lot of things. Even the issue of equality from the starting point of Genesis, you see that it is working well. There is a balance. It's not like a man now is on top and the woman is down, is looked down. God created them equal. And when we come after the fall, you see that actually the principles changes. A woman is being told something else. A woman is being told according to the consequences of the sin that they committed. Now, because man is put in authority, we see that man fails actually to do his authority well. He ends up actually sitting down and thinking that he can abuse his authority. And I think that's where a biggest problem comes in. And that's where we see even our cultures tends to fail to understand the biblical principle of marriage. Our cultures gives more power, more authority to a man, and whatsoever a man does, it viewed there is a view that it is right compared to what a woman does.
Yeah.
Hence, creating a problem that we cannot strike a balance. Because when women on the other side, they said, ah, no, it seems men, they are abusing their authority, then the movement of feminist comes in and the issue of equality comes in. So that's where now we are having a problem. And that's why today I was just reading something on Facebook. Someone said, he said, why is it that marriages for learned people easily break compared to marriages for people who are not learned? And it strikes us. Why? Because When a woman actually gets to understand their rights, they get to understand that actually it's not just a man who can provide in a house. Even me as a woman, I can provide. Problems comes in. And that's why now even the church needs to take a stance and to try to understand that we are living in a culture which has got a distorted view. Now, how do we strike a balance between the two? Because we were once told to say, no, whatsoever the case, you should fight for your marriage. And we have got women that are staying in marriages even today because of their children. They'll say, I'm just staying because of my children. So that's not marriage. That's not how God created it to be. Marriage, it has to serve God. It is a service because God has entrusted a man and a woman to be good stewards. He has entrusted them to look after this earth, which goes even beyond to take care of the environment, to take care of the animals. So now that's where
I allow
we are
myself.
struggling from.
Can I allow myself to concur with
Just
Josh?
a minute. I'll give you an opportunity, Mr. Pombo. Let's let Mr. Josh finish. I'll give you an opportunity.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, so basically, even when we come to the book of Genesis, and if we are to look at the African culture, do you know that the African culture is more close to the Bible compared to the Western culture? We are more close to the Bible. Even our cultures, the practices that we do, they are closely related. If you talk of the issues of polygamy and the like, you see that actually people would defend themselves. They'll say, didn't you see Abraham was a polygamist? Didn't you see what happened to Jacob? Didn't you see what happened to Solomon? So they'll get all these things. But the question is, when you check the line of the promise, the children that were being selected as the children of the promise, were they coming from those polygamist ways of life? You realize that actually God had his own plan and he had his own lineage. But because of sin and because man is put into authority, we tend to take our authority, abuse our authority, and undermine women. And I think that's where we are getting it wrong.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What a very exhaustive and in-depth contribution. Thank you for that. So we have a viewer who actually concurs with you and is talking about only one Bible. The purpose was man was created to worship God. When man gets more than one romantic partner, his attention is swayed. That's what happened to Solomon. Every human being carries a destiny. So having two women means dividing that destiny. And yeah, so that tallies a little bit with what you were saying. Mr. Pombo, you had a contribution?
Yes. I just wanted to remind Mr. Chewe, was it Mr. Chewe, I think? I think he was he got a very good discussion. To my point of view, I think it sounded as if it was a Christian marriage, and that's what I wanted just maybe to ask him to say, well, if it's a question of Christian marriage, definitely is absolutely correct, but we have also to help our forefathers, the traditional people, to understand also where these problems are coming in and to distinguish Christian marriage from, I think, an ordinary or a civil marriage. That's what I wanted just maybe to remind him.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. That is quite interesting. Key things that have come out. I'm going to ask Professor Kasonso, obviously, to summarize problems. The first part of our topics was obviously looking at the problems, why divorce rates are so high on both sides of the Atlantic as well as across the ocean in Africa. If you could just summarize the reasons that we have tackled, that would be wonderful, Professor Kasonso. And Mwelwa, if you could just think about what you think should be happening to make life more manageable for women in these marriages? Do you think they should try more to make things work? Or if something is not working, say for instance there's abuse, like sadly in Nigeria there was that worship leader who was being abused, but because she's in the church and she felt that she had to stay silent, it was such a shameful thing to divorce, she stayed and sadly lost her life. So just think about those things. What could women do to make relationships sustainable? Professor Kasonso, your summary please.
Yeah,
Belinda, can I also make just a closing remark at
Of
the end
course,
for, just
after
for a minute or so?
Okay. Tell you what, you go first, and then Professor Kasonso can close.
Yeah. So Belinda, we've heard from the last speaker. He says our African tradition are similar to the biblical tradition, to biblical ideals. And when you look at most of the marriages in the West, in America, in the UK, even in Zambia, most of them are in church. And it's the pastor or a reverend or a priest who ordains those marriages. So, which means most of the marriages in Zambia are Christian marriage. And what I'm going to say is based on the biblical principles. Just like Wakasonso said, monogamous is the God's idea. Even in the Garden of Eden, it was Adam and Eve, and there wasn't Adam or Adam and Eve and Joshua, or Adam and Eve and Elizabeth. But all marriages by Linda, you know, I'll start with one thing. God created a man and a woman equal. I'm talking about marriage, but with different roles. So man and woman are equal in marriage, but they've got different roles. And this is what Jesus says. Jesus said, and this is very important for all marriages to survive. Jesus said, the husband should love their wives just like Christ loves his spouse, the church. So that's the first definition of. So that role is the husband role in marriage. Though they are equal, the role of the husband, not the wife, is to love the wife just as Christ loves the church.
Okay.
If we do that, there won't be any marriages breaking. Then it goes further and says, what should be the role of the wife in that marriage? The role of the wife is to submit to the husband. That submission is a lot. Respect the husband. Does everything to make sure the husband is happy according to the Bible. So when you look at these this scripture about Jesus talking about the husband loving the church and the wife submitting to the husband, when we look at that seriously in the marriage, no marriage will end up in a divorce. Thank you.
Sorry, Linda, you're on mute.
I was just saying, Mr. Chilufya has just slightly preempted the next question we're moving on to about the solutions. So we're looking at the problem and dissecting what is going wrong, and now we're going to tackle the solutions. But before we do that, I want you to have a look at the current state of affairs on the side of women. What are women doing wrong that perhaps we can explore in the next topic as to how we can remedy that? What is going wrong to exacerbate this kind of situation?
I think I'm one of those feminists that think that you fight for an outcome that is favorable. And on planet Earth, we're just two genders, male and female. And when we look at this state, it means that you're fighting for equality not only for you, but even for your children, your males. And it's up to us women to train our children rightly. Unfortunately, one of the tragedies is that our young men are not being taught anymore. I don't think there's any concrete lesson that is being imparted into a young man to grow up to lead. And that's what happens. The reason most of these marriages are breaking down is because the men are not leading. And it's very possible for a woman to lead. The assumption is that a man is leading because he's making some money and he's paying his rentals and whatever, when actually that's not what leadership really is. And even when you look at the Bible, Mr. Patrick preempted this, but I always say, when you're talking about marriage and submission, start from Ephesians 5:21. Is it 21? Because it says, submit one to the other. Submission is just not the woman's job. It's equal. It's both your jobs. Even loving is submission. Loving as you love the church is submission. It's a big commitment. Jesus did such a big commitment when he dies on the cross. That's such a big submission of one's own life. And if we don't look at that, then there's a problem there. And that's where maybe, especially for women, it's that understanding that the submission element that's not just your job in a marriage. Your job equally is to make sure that you let the man be the man. Because sometimes there's that problem. You don't let the man be the man. And when the man is not being the man, there's no headship going on. So, you know what happens? Let me leave. There's that element as well. But okay. I think the assumption that money is what heads a household damages so many marriages. And the assumption of a woman equally to assume that the man is supposed to get married to you and then becomes your financial crutch equally makes you opportune to anything that happens. And I think the example of Osinachi in Nigeria is another one, because when you look at her life, the church failed her. I think the church failed her because a lot of the times in our churches, if you divorce, you're looked upon like you've done something wrong. You get pregnant, it's the same thing. You're being chased out of church when actually church is the refuge you're supposed to run to. That's the place you're supposed to keep you. But then there's that fear again, because oftentimes church is like this judgmental machine that's not actually reforming or offering you the place you're supposed to lie on for any, back or whatever. So I think those are some of the elements I would point to.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent summary. So women thinking that men should provide entirely financially, that becomes problematic. Those are some of the things that have come up. And submission should be a mutual thing. Perhaps women in high positions are thinking that they can't submit to their men because they earn just as much as their husbands or partners earn, which can be problematic. And what Joshua said was quite quite important, talking about how the African culture, especially people who've left Africa, I think we are at risk of forgetting our culture and adopting this culture, this new culture. Obviously, some things are good, some things are not so good, but it's really important to know that if you're in a partnership, you found the one, you found somebody who you absolutely love, whatever love means, who you care about, you build a family together. Submission should come naturally unless you are in a wrong environment. So that is quite important. Professor Kasonso, your summary, please, and then we'll move on to the last topic.
Yeah, some of the things that we've spoken about that I could reiterate is that the challenges of broken relationships or broken romances, particularly to those of us who were of the Republic of Zambia or come from the culture like ours, is partly a disturbance of the norms of our parents' culture that has come with the globalization, the advent of technology, and the post-Christian culture of the world of entertainment, and the adoption of some of the same values and the economic dynamics of families changing and things like that, some of the same values of the Western society. So because of that challenge, we have to find a new balance in the way we define relationships, what is important in a relationship. We have all gravitated towards the scriptures because part of it, we're a Christian nation, and the other part of it is most of us were raised in Christian homes.
Yeah.
And then we've tried to distinguish between what an ideal relationship is and what is a real relationship is. We did say here that monogamy is the ideal relationship that was created in ideal conditions of life before the fall. What we have after the fall, however, are real relationships with real human beings who are broken human beings, imperfect beings. So it is important for us to recognize, to not make the ideal the enemy of our lives, and not to be afraid of the real, but having the tenacity and the grace to live through our broken world with the ideal in mind, with the ideals of such relationships in mind. We have also said that there are elements of culture that are similar to the Bible culture. So we think more than two contributors here glorified our traditional African culture to be closer to the Bible. I don't necessarily agree with that view, but that view is something that there is a consensus here on the platform. And you can see some things there because the ancient traditions of the Bible stories are similar to the traditions of our culture. So you can see serious overlaps in those regards, the structure of society and the cultural makeup of those days. Yeah. So, but the biggest challenges that we have are these improvisations of what relationships should be. Should people seek third relationships? Should people, after they divorce, go on and seek new relationships? Should people, how do we curb the scourge of broken relationships? How can we build relationships that can last? Some suggestions have been made on this platform that we ought to have develop respect for partners, and we can do a checklist of different things that you can benefit from. So anyway, let's try and see what we can learn now in the next segment.
Fantastic. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Good. I seem to have frozen. Great. That is that's quite profound. Now we're going to move to the next one, solutions. Now we've explored what's going wrong, all the problems, the entanglements, the cultural clashes, copying from the West. Not everything from the West is bad, by the way, just as a disclaimer. Straying away from our cultures, not choosing the right partner to start with, I would say. If you choose the right person, monogamy should be a breeze. But if you choose the wrong one, then it becomes rather problematic. So now I'm going to start with Mr. Joshua. I don't know if that's your surname. Solutions. I would ask you to think about 5 solutions. Each one should think about at least 5, and then we're going to wrap up. Let's just stick to the 20 minutes, go through 5 solutions each, and then we can close. Solutions to reduce the number of divorces. How can we help? How can people mitigate their circumstances?
Yeah, I think to start with, like Patrick has just mentioned it, that the key thing is love. Because where there is true love, there can never be betrayal. And where there is true love, both parties will be able to submit to one another, and they'll be able to show love for one another. Then also, I think there is a need to start with, maybe from the church and also from the society, to invest more time in counselors who can be able to sit down at least these 2 people that are in marriage, in terms of if they are having some conflicts, where they can be able to speak out those issues and never keep them to themselves, never die with those issues, and at least seek for proper advice from counselors who are trained, rather than a situation where people just go to their friends and seek advice. Sometimes people may not truly understand the situation that is happening, because they might have just heard from one party. But if a counselor is there, will be able to hear from both parties and be able even to advise and help these people to forgive one another, and never at times see a divorce to be the only solution, but always to try to figure out how can each person forgive one another and how can each person change, because we know that we are not perfect people. We need to learn from one another. Thanks.
Have we lost? Oh, there she is.
Mr. Pombo, your turn. Solutions.
Some of the solutions I think I can present is, as I said before, mutual consent, respect, mutual respect, and then avoiding ignorance insofar as the meaning of a matrimony is concerned. Because where there is ignorance, that where comes in situations of I didn't know, I thought, I was presuming you knew, and so it's, avoid ignorance. Ignorance. We understand first of all the meaning, the deep meaning of a marriage, matrimony, for those who are not Christians, and then of course trust. To develop trust, you cannot just depend on the first at the beginning, the trust that the girlfriend, boyfriend they had when they were hunting each other, but I think to develop and spice on the trust between the two parties, and then of course to practice forgiveness between the two parties, because without forgiveness, I think no marriage is going to last in the modern world. It's quite difficult. Even its cell phone can be a reason of separation and divorce. So if at all the husband and wife or fiancés can learn as well to forgive each other, to tell each other the truth, I think that helps a lot. When you betray your partner, you tell your partner. I can conclude maybe my presentation or my submission by this interesting story. Helping young couple who are about to marry in 2 months' time. Then the boyfriend betrayed the girl. Not only did he betray the girl to one prostitute, but went on maybe to betray the girl to 2 or 3 prostitutes. Painful experience. And then he came to me and asked, what can I do? How can I do? Because our marriage is supposed to be due in 2 months' time. Of course, he cried very, very much. And I advised him to open up to the girlfriend, open up and explain everything. Tell your girlfriend everything. If your girlfriend loves you, you will go ahead. If she said, I am not going to leave the person who has betrayed me, then it's better as well for you. And the good result of this experience is that they came together, they went for a holiday for 3 days. They explained all this disaster, and they understood each other. They had mutual, they developed the trust, and today they have 3 children. Wonderful experience.
Fantastic story. Thank you very much for sharing. Mwelwa, your solutions, please.
I was thinking about solutions, and I don't know. I'll read something I wrote, an article I wrote for some publication, 2018. I hope that gives a few in my understanding, this is what I thought was the solution. So I'll read it.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to hear all your views.
Yeah. So I have this idea that there's a 100% marriage theory. And I think marriage is too unique an arrangement to enter into, saying this is a 50-50 type of arrangement. It's equally easily misconstrued to explain that man and woman are equals when actually equality is simply at humanity level. So each individual should come in as a partner, each all in at 100% in their roles as husband and wife. 100 is loving your wife as Christ loved the church. Submission is a 100% thing to the extent that the Zambian culture teaches you exactly how to submit. My argument is that, like, seriously, how can you quantify marriage? Even the headship itself is reliant on there being a woman in the first place, a whole being who isn't 100%. Who isn't 50%. The woman too brings in 100% to the arrangement. So the moment we reduce or adjust these, we create room for dissatisfaction and we create room for feminism to exist and create a 50-50% nonsense. So for example, if a man is the head of the house, he takes, let's say, 75%, then the wife takes 25% based on the 50-50 arrangement. The man automatically assumes rights he probably should not even take. It creates license for men who decide, because I'm a man, I won't cook or help with night duties or diaper changes and night feeds, because he's the head and reserves the right to exercise his 75% as and when he pleases. So he wake the woman up for conjugal rights in that every night that the woman has to wake up to be a mother. That 25% creates a slave and not a companion. Yet if we both bring in 100% each, knowing and understanding the purpose in a marriage, the disparities disappear. Roles are shared because it's a role that men physically and actively are set in their headship. Yet if they understood their purpose, they would understand that headship is actually 50% roles and 50% presence. So presence is all you have at the start of a relationship. And when the children finally leave, the moment presence is omitted, marriages automatically fall through. Hence our parents divorcing in old age. We millennial bunnies, unfortunately, have the added burden of financial independence. And if presence disappears, the moment commitment is secured in marriages, we choose the exit route. Divorce a lot quicker than our mothers did, who had no financial security.
Amazing.
So
yeah.
This is what I would say might be some of the solutions.
Thank you. So beautifully put. Thank you so much for that, Mwelo. And Mr. Chilufya, you did give us an elaborate array of solutions earlier on. So unless you had something else to add, because what you said was quite profound, very important. If you have one more to add to what you had said, feel free. But if not, I'll pass it on to Professor Kasonso to close. You're on mute, Mr. Chilufya.
Yeah, I won't say all of them, but I will just emphasize on one or two.
Sure.
And then I will say something else. But Linda, there's a most of these marriages in Zambia, let's assume they are Christian marriages, because we are 99% Christian. So the Bible says, unless the Lord builds the house, they that labors, but in vain. So you know what that means? The foundation. So that is the key to long-lasting marriages. The foundation. What does it mean to build the house? Unless the Lord builds the house, which means the foundation is very strong. And you remember I mentioned about choosing the partners wisely, and Bampombo mentioned about courtship. That's the time to choose. But many other times we rush into something, and then before we know it, I went into a wrong marriage and we are divorcing, or I want to divorce. And then I mentioned about the most important foundation in marriage, whether Christians or non-Christians. Every relationship, marriage, should be based on mutual respect and trust. If those two things are not there from the beginning and going forward, because if you're in a marriage and somebody is misbehaving, the trust is lost. And when trust is lost, it's not easy to earn it. I rest my peace.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. I will give my 5 quickly here. For us to resolve the romantic problems and the problems of the epidemic or the problem of the epidemic of broken marriages, I think there are certain fundamentals that we are going to work on. Number one, if you get in the relationship or you are in one or you're in a marriage, take the faults of your partner in stride. You are not getting married in the Garden of Eden where the marriage was ideal. You are getting married in a broken world. So take the faults of your partner in stride. In other words, have empathy towards one another. And that is where we can never beat harder the drum that Father Mpombo did beat on forgiving each other's faults, as even Christ has forgiven you your own sins. When people live in a situation where they are able to forgive each other's faults, there is no need. Then the need for the marriage to end is not there. So take the faults of your partner in stride. That would help greatly. That means we have to have empathy. When a marriage ends, it's usually not the fault of one person. The fault is on both. The problem is on both sides. So if there is empathy, then the relationship can last. Secondly, don't be a burden. Don't be a burden. In today's world, if you are a burden in the marriage, you are putting pressure on the other partner to take off a burden, because every burden in this life cannot stay on a human being until death do him apart. No, the burden is heavy. It's a load of life, and it is intended to be offloaded. So if you become a burden in a marriage, you are going to be offloaded. So don't be a burden, you are going to be offloaded. Let me give an example. In Proverbs chapter 13, the woman in that passage, that wife in that passage had industry, she had enterprise. She had a way to bring in even resources in the family. Don't you be a burden in the name of wife. Don't you be a burden if you're a husband. And don't accept a freeloader around your life. Because if you accept a freeloader, the moment they even just start collecting a penny from a filling station, they will meet other richer people than you. Then they will go and be a burden somewhere else. They will upgrade. So it's that mindset. So don't you be a burden. Number three, keep the romantic fire burning. What that means, minimize your time on social media and focus on the person that you have feelings for. Romance can last if you reduce the amount of distractions. Keep the romantic fire burning, because there is a component of the marriage relationship. Marriage is sexually intensive, and intensive sex over a long period of time tends to be boring. So that makes people diversify very easily, long before they're discovered. So keep the romantic fire burning. That is the way to keep the relationship going. Number four, copy only the good things from other marriages. Copy only the good things from other marriages. Everything you're going to go through, other people have already gone through them. So you can copy the good things. Don't copy the bad things from the other marriages. Now, keep this in mind, that you can try to obey the 10 commandments. You can try to be a perfect wife. You can try to be a perfect husband. Sometimes it's just about time to let go. The person's part in your life could have legitimately just come to an end. So number five, if the donkey is dead, dismount. I'll end there.
Professor has said it. If the donkey is dead, my golly gosh, it's time for you to dismount. Thanks so much. Well, panel, that has been quite a candid conversation about marriage, monogamy or lack of, living in an imperfect world. Now, it's often been said that healthy relationships are defined by a number of necessary components. So based on what everyone has said, I've picked 6 components from this. So that's empathy, trust, respect, compromise, laughter, and excellent communication. And I would add, to start with, choose the right person. If you choose the right person, you choose the right horse or the right donkey, in in regards to what Professor Kasonso says.
No, the donkey is not the human being. It's the relationship.
It's a relationship.
Yeah, the donkey is dead. Dismount.
If you choose the right relationship, you won't have to be dismounting on anything. Well, this has been the Linda Banks Show on TV, Bakwetu, and I've been your host, Linda. I would like to say a humongous thank you to Mr. Patrick Chilufya, Professor Jones Kasonso, Mwelwa, and Mr. Pombo, and our guest, Joshua. Thank you so much for joining us. Till next time, God bless you and God bless our country. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.